The National Airspace System. Quick review, this is not to prepare you for the exam, it's just to prepare you for getting out in the field and operating commercially. At this point, you either have it or you're very close to achieving the Part 107 commercial pilot's license. So let's just talk practicality about airspace. We have different classes of airspace. And what the point of airspace is to separate manned aircraft from unmanned aircraft. Just keep in the back of your mind in all of this discussion that helicopters operate in the same airspace as we often operate in the same airspace as we do, below 400 feet altitudes. So the FAA's specified 400 feet, that takes us away from almost all fixed-wing manned aircraft. They're not likely to be flying lower than that, but helicopters still fly in that area. Okay, we have Class B airspace. Here's a picture here of Charlotte International Airport, solid blue lines. Remember that you look down at for altitude, you look at the bottom, that's MSL altitudes. The very bottom of the chart, of this picture anyway, says 100, that's 10,000 feet. The top of this controlled airspace, and below is 6,000 feet. Drop the 2 zeros, save ink. And then over a little bit to the lower right of that, there's that section is 4,000 feet at the bottom of the control. If anything above 4,000 feet and below 10,000 feet is controlled by that particular airport, Charlotte in this case, controlled airspace. All of these little shelf areas we don't really care about because we're below 400 feet. We do care about that center area right around the Charlotte airport. It says SFC, that's surface. So they're talking about at the surface. So we cannot fly in that area unless we get a waiver or unless we get permission. Well, that's how we get the permission. And really, they're working away from contacting the actual, they don't want you to call actual control tower. They want you to contact the FAA and get permission either through that LANC system that we've talked about previously or through going directly to the FAA and asking for them to intercede for you in this particular operation. But almost always it's either a waiver or through the LANC, and that's what LANC is really. If you can't get a LANC, if that's been refused, then you work through the FAA through their waiver process. And remember, waivers, you need to come up with some documents that tell them, prove to them, I guess, demonstrate to them, even a better word, demonstrate to them that you can operate this way safely. You have the right equipment, you have the right ability, you have the crew, maybe necessary, whatever, so that you can handle any kind of contingency that might happen. Specifically, they're concerned about, is your aircraft going to be flying in an area where there's also manned aircraft? So that's category B, not a huge, and of course there's a little picture of a upside down wedding cake, basically. Yeah, busiest airports in that center section from the surface. Then there's C, which is this magenta area. Here's a picture of Nashville, of the chart of Nashville. Blue airport, so you know it's control tower, obviously. And you have these shelf areas around it, but then on the inner part you have surface, FFE, again, anywhere in there you want to go, and you know, just imagine places where I can imagine places where you'd want to fly in that area that would be of interest. Well, you need to get, again, LANC approval or a waiver process where you end up talking to or explaining to the FAA how you think you could do that safely. So sort of what I'm getting at here is you need to be paying attention to the charts. You need a chart. If they're all there electronically, not a big deal. Class C looks like that with like a cone over the top and a surface area in the middle. Okay, now here's the D airspace around Gwinnett County, Briscoe Field, northeast Atlanta. You'll notice actually there's a solid blue line. That's the edge of the Atlanta area, Class B, but then around the Briscoe Airport, there's dashed blue. That's Class D, and that's surface. It's going to be from the surface up. So looking at the chart there, you see the 12,506. Huh? No, that's the Atlanta section. That's that section of Atlanta. Then the little box with the 36 in it, that's saying that within this Class D airspace around Briscoe Airport, it's from the surface up to 3,600, including 3,600 feet. That's controlled airspace. So, you know, you want to go, I think the Mall of Georgia falls within this ring here. I'm not sure about that. But anyway, if you want to fly over the Mall of Georgia, I suspect, or within that area, then you need to get a LANC approval or a waiver, basically ending up talking to the FAA. The FAA is wanting to make these kind of allowances. They're trying to help. They're working with us. They're not against us. They're not the enemy by any means. So that's Class D. So far, that's, you know, B, C, and D. So far, there's not really a major issue. It's not that confusing. But we come to Class E airspace. Class E airspace, of course, is that magenta dashed line. Okay, here's a good example here, Des Moines. Let's see if I can read it. Ankeny Regional IKV Airport. Okay, magenta, dashed magenta line around it. That's surface. Magenta dash goes from the surface, always goes to the surface, and then goes up to 700 feet. So we can't fly in that area. That's Class E surface. You see that diagram. Class E otherwise, we'll look at Thomaston here. Here's Class E otherwise. That's shaded magenta lines. And if it doesn't have the dashed magenta lines, that means this airspace, controlled airspace, starts at 700 feet above the ground. So you can fly within this area without permission. You can't go above 700 feet in this area. And outside that area, it's 1,200 feet, so that's not even an issue. It's usually, I mean, if there's a very tall tower you're doing an inspection, that may be a concern. But the area outside of this is, they call it en route Class E airspace. Everything below that, okay, which is our concern, is Class G. So outside this shaded area here, below 1,200 feet is Class G, and we're good to go. Within inside the circle, below 700 feet, is Class G, and we're good to go. The surface E is exactly what it says, from the surface up, so we can't fly in there without permission from air traffic control. And again, you may be able to get that through LANC. Probably not. They're only usually for major metropolitan areas, but I think they're working on improving that. But waivers are possible, or working with the FAA somehow. So those are the different classifications of airspace that will, for practicality. We need to be aware of those. We can't just jump in the, you know, not pay attention. I mean, we check to make sure there's no NOTAMs, no temporary flight restrictions or TFRs. You know, obviously that's just part of our job. That's what we have to do. We have to check the chart somehow to make sure. We can't just trust on DJI. They do have little apps that help you, and because they're concerned about liability. But you also need to have access to either a paper chart or electronic one, which electronic is free, so that's where most people go. And that's also updated automatically if you get it from the appropriate site and you do the updates. You'll have an up-to-date chart. That's important, though, to make sure they're up-to-date. A chart that's 5 years old may not have the up-to-date information, so you have to, if you're downloading it from the FAA site, you'd have to check every so often and re-download a fresh copy. If you have a paper copy, then you've got to get new ones all the time. And along with that, of course, you've got to check for TFRs because they just pop up, and NOTAMs as well. That's part of your responsibility for entry into the National Airspace System. Beyond line of sight, yeah, there's going to be more rules come out, so pay attention and continue to learn as we go along. Remember, Class E, everything that's not controlled airspace is Class G, which we can fly in. Class E is pretty much everywhere, but it's above 1,200 feet and above, almost everywhere, but around airports, typically magenta airports like this, which are pilot controlled or uncontrolled airports, It will be 700 feet and above will be Class E, and Class G will be below 700 feet. We can fly on there, but we need to be careful because other manned aircraft will be flying in there, including helicopters. That's why, and of course that is the rule. We're not allowed to interrupt with the traffic flow in and out for manned aircraft pilots landing at this particular airport, let's say, and we're not allowed to interfere with air traffic, and we're not allowed to cause them to have to deviate to avoid hitting us. That's on us.